Well, hello, everyone. Uh, it's good to be with you. Today is Thursday, May 22nd, 2025. And we're so glad to have another podcast. I know we didn't have one last month because we had our luncheon, but we're back doing them again. And we have a lot to cover today, especially on the tax bill. So get ready for that. I will first start with Dryden. We're going to be covering, what's going on with the tariffs. And then, like I said, tax bill. And then we'll do a little market outlook and also talk about Federal Reserve and what's going to happen there with interest rates. So, Dryden, tell us what's going on with the tariffs right now. Who agreed, where we are, what's the timeline, what can we expect on tariffs?
Well, there's been significant movement, and there's still anybody's guess on what the final bills are going to be. Obviously, we got a deal with the UK, and then the president moved the 145 down to 30 with China while they're negotiating. And that was one of those moments where China and the US both could claim some sort of victory over the impasse that they had. Still, the bottom line here is still all about China. That's the big thing here. But the framework is in place for many other countries. The question is when we're going to trot it out. But I do want to point out to the listeners a couple of key things, remind them of a couple of key things that they may not know, is that in all of this, you have to remember that 75% of our trade is with the European Union and seven other countries. That's the biggest part. 144 countries out there. We don't have any agreements with 100 of them. We don't do enough to matter. But when you really think about it, it is that group. And I want to kind of walk through them really quickly. It's the European Union, Mexico, China, Canada, Japan, Vietnam, South Korea, and India. Now, those countries make up about 75% of our imports. And the fundamental issue that people have to pay attention to is that if China, and those imports to us are 2.3% of their economy. So they don't sell to us, and 145 basically would have stopped it all. They don't sell to us. Their gross domestic product goes down by 2.3%. They go into a recession. Okay, that's a very bad thing for China, particularly for Xi, particularly when he starts having an unemployment spike and they have to send people back to the villages. In India, it's very much the same thing. They stop exporting to us, so then they go down by 2.3%. They have a recession. So you have these two big guys that we have trying to work deals with that they literally have to do business with us or they get into recession. Now, for everybody else, it's even worse. Exports to the United States are 29% of the Mexican economy. They're 18.4% of the Canadian economy. They're 3.6% of the Japanese economy. They're 33% of the Vietnamese economy, 7% of Korea. So for all those other big trading partners, they don't make a deal, they go into depression. So when you think of all of the large countries that are out there, the ones we have made the trading with, what's most important to realize is that they need us more than we need them. And that is why we're going to begin to see this continued involvement of making the deals. And I don't think you can expect the administration to run all of their victories out at once. What will happen is you'll begin to see probably, it looks like Japan and South Korea may be next up. And so we'll go a couple of days and we'll say, oh, okay, well, here's the deal with Japan. And a couple more days, and then, oh, okay, here's the deal. And then they'll start talking about what the deal is. And there's a lot of technical things in tariffs. So you can't just say we have a deal and it immediately happens the next day. There's a lot of movement here. But I think what you're seeing is a little bit of gamesmanship. We didn't announce a bunch of stuff right now because earnings have come back pretty good. The market has come back dramatically. We are back to kind of where we're only down 0.5% the S&P for the year. We're at a place one would normally be okay with at this point. And so now you can look forward to sooner or later, we're going to have a more definitive trade deal. Yay. And then that'll be with one country. And then 3 or 4 days later, there'll be another one. The thing that's important to realize, though, is July the 8th is the important day. We put a pause on everything to July the 8th. And so all of this stuff we're going to try to get done by then. A lot of other timing gets important as we get into talking to tax law as well.
Okay. All right, well. Uh-oh. All right, well, the House, by a very, very narrow vote, one to be exact, passed a bill last night. And it's 498 pages worth. Now, I've spent a good amount of time going over it, and I want to just go through some of the things that have passed. Now, remember that this bill, or what I'm going to talk about today, only passed the House. It still has to pass the Senate, and it will change because the House and the Senate have different views on things. So some of the things in there about Medicaid and assault deduction primarily, and also a couple other things they disagree on. So there'll be some changes, but I do want to go through some of the things that have passed so that you're aware. One of the biggest things which we knew would pass is the fact that they made the income tax rates that we have right now permanent. That means unless there's a huge change and so forth, these tax rates that we have today, the maximum rate being 37% is now made permanent. If you remember, when the first tax law passed, it was only for 10 years, and that's why we're having to make another tax law changes right now, because they were only done for 10 years. But now they won't have to deal with that 10 years from now. So that is really would be good news, and we think that would pass both the House and the Senate. The other changes they made is regarding to estate tax exemption. They raised the estate tax exemption right now. An individual can leave about 14 million without estate taxes. That's going to go to 15 million, and for a couple that'd be 30 million, and it will be adjusted for inflation. So for most of you out there, will not have to worry so much about estate taxes. We thought if this would have expired, it could have gone down to 5 or 7 million. We don't necessarily have to worry about that. Now, also, one of the promises that were made is exempting tips and overtime from taxes. Well, they did that, but it's only for a certain amount of income. If your income is high, you do not get that exemption, and it's only for 4 years. So, I guess he's going to leave it for the next president to worry about, but this exemption from tips and overtime from taxes is only till 2028. Which also is the same thing when it comes to, they could not really get a Social Security income exemption, but what they did is they did a $4,000 deduction for anyone who's over age 65. And doesn't have to be necessarily income from Social Security. They just gave a 4,000 kind of a standard deduction. It's not an itemized deduction, it's a standard deduction. It's per individual, so a couple would get 8,000. However, that's only if your income level is $150,000 or lower, and it will phase out at 250,000. So you get the full deduction up to 150, and after that, if you make over 250 as a couple, you really do not get that deduction. But at least for those people in that level of income, they will get that deduction, and that's only available till 2028 as well. So it is not a permanent deduction, but it is there. Also, there's a new tax deduction for buying a car that is made in the United States. You can deduct up to $10,000 of interest expense on any car made that you bought. If you bought a car and you financed it and your interest expense is $10,000, you can deduct that again till 2028. So the next president is going to have a lot to deal with, but it is available there. And that also has an income limit. If you make too much money, you can't take that deduction, but it is available now for those people. Also, they are giving everyone an extra $1,000 standard deduction. and a $500 extra bonus for child tax credit. So right now, child tax credit is $2,000. It would go up to $2,500, and that's also till 2028. There's a theme here. But some of the things that are more permanent is the business qualified business income deduction. That right now, if you have a business and you have pass-through income from that business, a manufacturing or a real estate investment income, or anything that has a S corporation or an LLC or a self-employment that is not personal service, you're able to deduct 20% of your income from taxes. That is going up to 23%. So that is really good news. I think the thought there is to encourage small businesses, small manufacturing, so forth, to hire more people. They're going to get a huge tax break going from 20% tax cut to 23%. Also, staying on that same, the bonus depreciation for real estate, any properties that you buy from January 19, 2025 until January 1st, 2030, you will get that extended bonus depreciation for more write-off. And there's also 100% depreciation allowance for non-residential properties. What they've taken away is taking away the tax credit for electric cars, and also the solar tax credits will end at 2028. So also, if you are going to put in solar, you have until 60 days after the passage of the bill. You can still get the credit right now if you wanted to do solar, but we expect this bill to be passed sometime in July. So 60 days after that, if you buy solar, you can still get a 30% tax credit. Thereafter, it's going to be very limited. Let's see, the big one is the SALT deduction. That is the amount that is deducted, where here in California, we pay a lot of property taxes and income taxes. So that limit right now is 10,000. That will go up to 40,000 for people making $500,000 income or below. So if you make over 500,000, it will go down, and you won't get as much effect on it, but there will be still a relief from the 10,000, somewhere between 20 or 30. We don't know what the number is, but there's definitely a relief in that, so that most people will be able to itemize again. Now, they did take away all miscellaneous deduction. There's no more miscellaneous deduction as a deductible item. They're taking that away. Also, several interesting things for 529 plans. Really big news here. 529 plans will be able to be used for elementary school, secondary school, high school. You can use it for tuition. Where right now, the 529 plans is only for college or above, 12K and above, and then right now the tuition is only limited to 10,000 for high school. You'll be able to use it for any schooling. We don't know if it's limit of 10,000 or what, but it will be, if you want to send your children to private school or an elementary school or preschool, it's going to be, you'll be able to use the 529 plan, which is really, really good news for the people of 529 plans. But there's a brand new thing called, well, some people call it mega, the mega account, or some people are calling it the Trump account. But for any child born in the next 4 years, between 2025 and 2029, the government is going to put $1,000 into this mega account. And that mega account will be available until under 8 years of age. And the government puts in one time 1,000, but individuals, parents, anybody can put in as much as $5,000 a year in these accounts, and they can be invested in the market, but not stocks, mutual funds, ETFs. And they can fund them for $5,000 a year all the way until 8 years of age. And it's really more like a 401k. So the money grows tax deferred, but when they're taking out the money, it's taxable. So children can have a 401k in a way, and they don't have any income limits and so forth. They just have to be funded. And the first 1,000 will be from the government. We don't know yet if there's certain income limits who they will give that to, but I think it's pretty exciting for that. Let's see. Also, right now, charitable deductions are only deductible if you itemize. They are allowing individuals to deduct, whether they itemize or not, up to $150 for charitable deduction and $300 for joint. 150 for single, it's 300 for joint. Let's see. Oh, another one that I really like, this HSA contributions. They're increasing the health savings account contributions, and they're doing a new one for people over age 65. So if you're over age 65, you can set up your own. If you have Medicare Part A, you can set up your own health savings account where you can put money in tax deducted off your income, and you can use that to pay for things that are not covered by your medical insurance. And they're allowing also for people who are age 55 years or older to do what we call a catch-up provision into the health savings account if they have one and they haven't been putting money. But this is really good for people who are on Medicare, where they can put money aside and deduct it today and have it, because as you know, regardless, unless you go with an HMO, there's very few things that you don't pay out of pocket. Like I have a wonderful HSA I've had for a long time, and I love using it to pay my non-deductibles or anything to do with prescriptions that are not covered, anything like that. You can use it and it's all tax-free. So for the very first time, people over age 65 will be able to have these HSA accounts. Like I said, there's just a lot, almost 400 pages worth. I'm just really covering the surface here about telling you about some of these things. Let's see, they're gonna trying to reduce fraud in Medicaid, modernize federal information technologies. Told you about the estate exemption. Okay, the overtime and tip is for individuals earning 160,000 or below. And told you about the 529 plan. I think these are I told you about the Social Security. It's really not a Social Security. It's just a $4,000 per individual. So, like I said, this is the beginning of this tax bill. It has not passed yet, but we do believe a lot of these things will be incorporated when the Senate passes the bill, and when it is an absolute bill that will go into effect. I will probably have to spend a whole time, and we'll go through in details and tell you all the limits, the income limits and so forth. But there's some very exciting things: the HSA, the 529 plans, the SALT deduction, the no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, the higher deduction for credit, the higher deduction for the SALT deduction. So a lot of stimulus, which we believe, as you notice, a lot of it only lasts to 2028, and a lot of it is for middle income America, which I believe will give people more money to spend and will help our economy and our stock market. So I'm going to hand it back to Dryden and have him tell us, now that we know there's this framework that will get passed, how's that going to affect the markets, and what can we expect for the markets between now and the end of the year?
Let me take a few seconds here and kind of talk about the balancing act, because like you talk about all this legislation, it hasn't gone through the Senate yet. You probably have a period of time. So what's going on here is, as they're working through the frameworks of the tariffs, the bill is working its way through the Senate. The finalization of the tariff agreements, which will be happening, the next, month or two, is going to tell us how much money that the tariffs are going to generate. So that allows the Senate and the House, and they go to reconciliation, to back into what's the true nature of this package, because this whole thing is tariffs as an income generating thing, but it is a tax, and in some cases it is restrictive. And then it's tax cuts as a stimulative matter, right? You cut it, you stimulate it, you put more money into the economy. So the big debate and the question right now is going to be, are the revenue from the tariffs going to be enough that they can cut the taxes so that it's overall a very stimulative bill. And that's kind of the direction they're getting. And that's why it's hard to know exactly what's there. So you have, and this goes back to the real question that everybody has as it pertains to markets and the economy. Are we going to have a recession? Well, I think it's important to recognize you've got 4 or 5 things that are happening that pretty much convince me that we're not. The first one is we're still living in the results of the COVID stimulus. You've heard me talk about this so many times. 5 years ago, we put $5.4 trillion into the economy in 1 year. That is more than we put in all 4 years of World War II. And the World War II stimulus went on for almost 20, 30 years. We're only 5 years post-COVID. So this fundamental stimulus is still as an anchor, kind of a floor, kind of a concrete base to the economy. And now you add on top of that the following. You add on the top that more people are working, making more money than ever before. We've grown the equivalent of France in the last 5 years in terms of what our GDP growth has and the things that we've added. So you add that many people. We're still adding over 100,000 people a month, 100,000 jobs a month. It was 177 last time. So you have all of these things that drive what is really continued growth. And then on top of it, you have this bill now that is going to be stimulative in nature. So when you look at all of this, you recognize that there's a whole lot of underlying stimulative factors to the economy that actually weigh it towards growth and not recession. And then you have to recognize that the Fed has something that they haven't had in a decade, and that's dry powder. They've got room. They're at 4.5% on the federal funds rate. And if you begin to see some degradation, some slowing down in the economy, they have the ability to dial it back up. So all of these things portend that we're probably not going to have a recession. And if we do, it's exceedingly mild and short because the Fed's got room to move. So against that backdrop of all of this stuff, you ask me, gee, what's the stock market going to do? Well, when you got an economy doing well, you've got earnings. Most of the corporate earnings estimates are at all-time highs. Most companies are beating their earnings as we've seen estimates come out. So you have this, what's the stock market going to do? If earnings are at an all-time high, then you're probably going to see the stock market at an all-time high. It makes sense, right? And so you're beginning to look at, we had this big dip, a lot of overreaction. We've talked about that. We're now back roughly flat on the year. And we can say, what's all the math? Well, the math says that you're probably in a positive, and we get to the end of the year, you're positive single digits, probably it's either mid to high single digits on the positive side. And that's without getting a whole lot of stimulus pushing on these earnings. If that all comes through, you probably could see it do a little bit more. But the uncertainty is there. It's freaking people out a little bit. Here's the thing to know. This period of uncertainty is finite. We're going to find out over the next 60, 90 days what all this legislation is going to do. We're going to begin to know and clarify that. And when we do, it's going to take a certain amount of uncertainty out of the markets. And when you get rid of uncertainty in the US stock market, that becomes a very stimulative nature because American industry and American companies are the most innovative in the world. If you give a level of reasonable certainty on interest rates, a level of reasonable certainty on the economy, and more importantly, deregulation, you unleash the creative juices, if you will, or the animal spirits in both the market and the economy, and it moves forward exceedingly well.
By the way, there's a bunch of deregulations in this bill.
Exactly. And so you're beginning to see, the idea that we're going to be unleashed and unleashed. Yeah, this is kind of crazy, but an unleashed economy is far better than unhinged uncertainty. And I think that we're going to begin to see these moments as we go for the next 90 to 120 days. These clouds clear, and people are going to be able to see as we move forward that we have a stimulative tax bill, stimulative overall balance between tariffs and taxes, and the underlying strength of the economy comes soon. We're still looking at a positive year on the markets.
So what can we expect as far as the Federal Reserve? I mean, it's kind of interesting that the bond market is raising interest rates. And while the Fed has not raised interest rates.
Yeah, and I think so. Part of this has to do with they don't know what the final outcome of the tax bill is. The United States has a tremendous amount of debt. They've been trying to discipline themselves around that. This is probably one of the first administrations that actually is trying to raise revenue and cut costs. And they talk about Doge and they talk about cutting waste and things like that. That's very true, and that's going to solve part of the problem. They're not going to really solve the problem until they deal with entitlements. But the idea that we, the United States, have all of this debt, and we did have the downgrade most recently, we've got to begin to make some definitive movements on that. That's the back end of this tax bill, right? If we're able to, as they understand the additional billions of dollars of revenue that the tariffs are bringing apart together, and we don't, this is where the debates are within the Republicans. It's not that they don't want a bill. It's just within that bill, how much money is there to cut the deficit? And that's going to be the debate
It's
we
really
have.
important.
It's really important because as we can demonstrate that some of the money, not all that's going to go to tax cuts and be fully stimulative, and it doesn't need to be, right? But not all of the money is just going to go back to the taxpayers. A lot of it's going to go back into paying off the deficit. And if they can demonstrate that, you're going to begin to see a normalization or much better reaction from the bond market going forward, better reaction for debt markets going forward. And this is very much a wait and see. The other thing that's really important, you brought this up, what about the Fed? What about the Fed? What about the Fed? The Fed has room at 4.5% on the federal funds rate. It's high by certain standards, but quite frankly, we were at 5.5 for a year. The world did not come to an end.
No.
We're going to be at 4.5 for a year, which is almost a 20% cut between previous year. The world does not come to an end. It's actually accretive, and it increases profit margins for companies, and that's one reason why you see profit margins go forward, because their cost of inventory goes down. They're going from 5.5 to 4.5. Now the question is, as we get into the rest of this year, when do we get a cut? And I think the Fed is going to be slow to cut. I think we probably end up with one 25 basis point cut later in the year, talking about maybe September. And then they'll probably wait and see. A lot of it's going to be data driven. And so you could see one in September, October, somewhere there. And maybe if for some reason they could look at doing another. But I'm in the camp that says that we're going to try to be stable for a while. And unless we see a big change in the number of jobs being created, I think you're probably going to see the Fed be reluctant to lower interest rates any time too early, because they've gotten the inflation genie, kind of back in the bottle. They don't want to let it out again. It could come back with a vengeance. We are seeing some movements come up. So in the world of uncertainty, unless you're seeing some real decline in the economy, I think the Fed stands pat until September.
But we know that they'll cut at least once, and that will help the markets as well.
Right. Well, okay. Here's the point. The market's very important. Certainly the market's very important to the administration. They get to pick their timing. It's a tremendous luxury. They get to pick their timing. If they have 15 trade deals framed up, they're not going to announce all of them at once. They're going to go, here's this one. Market will probably react positively, and they'll wait a few days. And then here's another one, and the market reacts positively, and they'll wait a few days. So you're beginning to see this cadence of activity taking place that's going to be kind of measured in terms of how can we move the markets forward and continue to have the economy be stable. So they're sensitive to that. Don't put out all your good news all at once. Meter it out there. Get the biggest bang for the
Certainly love
buck.
TV and loves. I mean, I've never seen anybody as covered as much as DC's been covered lately. But anyway, so to wrap it up, things are fine. Things are going to get better. We have a tax bill finally. We will have a bill. I know they're hoping maybe July 4th would be signed. That may be too soon, but if not July 4th, it'll be sometime in the end of July, because some of these things do go back to the beginning of the year, and they need that especially if there's still some things to do with the tariffs. We need that stimulus. But I know they're shooting for July 4th, Independence Day.
Well, I think this is, they say that this is the thing. What happens on when we move forward into this period of time of July the 8th, right? You've got the possibility of those tariffs now, or the pause expiring. So I think you're going to begin to see the White House
Have the bill
be
before the tariff.
yes, they're going to be very, very, sensitive to that. And I wouldn't be surprised if, starting now that the House has done it, starting right after Memorial Day, that every day or two the president's going to be whipping on the Senate and say, you got to hurry, 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 because they really don't have any time. They really don't. They've got to get all this stuff in and done before you get to the midterms.
Also,
And
that,
so it's
that bill has a debt ceiling increase, so they want to get that in before that comes up again. So I do think they're gonna get something passed.
I think I think that probably after Memorial Day, the president may take a 4-minute celebratory comment about how Johnson got it all done, and then he's going to look at the Senate, Senator Thune or any of those people, and going to start harping on it every day to get the rest of it finished.
Okay, I know we've gone over time, so let's just remind you that next podcast is a different time. It's not a Thursday, it's a Tuesday. The reason we're doing it Tuesday is because the Federal Reserve meets on June 18th, but June 19th is actually a holiday. So we decided, a lot of people say, why can't you do a different day than Thursday? So guess what? We're getting it Tuesday. So please mark that in your calendar. It is June 24th, Tuesday, June 24th at 3 p.m. is our next podcast. Stay tuned. You'll get an invitation from us reminding you as well, but make sure and put it in your calendar from now. And I wish you all a great Memorial Day weekend, holiday. Enjoy your holiday. Things will be fine. And goodbye.
Layla Pence is a registered representative with, and securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA/SIPC. Dryden Pence is a registered representative with, and securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA/SIPC. The financial professionals affiliated with PWM are registered representatives with, and securities and investment advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA/SIPC. Pence Wealth Management PWM and LPL Financial are separate entities.